Ross Ramsey, Texas Tribune, joining us. And so Texas House Speaker Dennis Bonnen has kind of been embroiled in this controversy, this recording of him that is, allegedly shows him plotting against some members of his party. And now there is new developments in this. We might actually hear this recording.
Bonnen met with an activist named Michael Quinn Sullivan, guy from Empower Texans, at the end of the session back in June. And Sullivan taped the meeting. Bonnen apparently or allegedly said some indiscreet things, and this has been dripping out all summer, and the House is kind of in turmoil about it. It's kind of a tempest in a teapot, but it could threaten the Speaker's speakership. So everybody's been saying, let's hear the recording, let's hear the recording. Now Michael Quinn Sullivan says he's going to release it next week. That's also when the House Republican caucus has scheduled a meeting. I don't know if those are coincidental or not, but it's certainly, if you're Bonnen, it's either good news, it's going to end my nightmares, or it's going to start a new one.
So, in this recording, he is alleged to have offered access to the House floor if they kind of create news stories or whatever that target 10 members of his party. Why would he want to target 10 members of his party?
Well, that's a good question. If he did, if he did,
yeah.
Right. Sullivan says that he did, and says that he wanted to replace those with more stout Republicans. Exactly what that means, I'm not sure. Bonnen says that's not what happened. Dustin Burrows has been relatively quiet. He's a House member who was also in the meetings. And really everybody from Greg Abbott to Dan Patrick to Dennis Bonnen on down has said, let's hear the recording, let's make it public, let's make it public. Until now it has not been. Sullivan says he'll make it public next week.
Can we read anything into the decision to want to make it public? Do we feel that backs up Sullivan's story, that he feels that he's going to be vindicated in this?
I don't know. Until we actually hear the thing, we don't actually know. That's been really the question. He alleges this. Bonnen says this in response. The Department of Public Safety has been investigating, because if the original allegation made by Sullivan was true, that could be an illegal thing, this for that. So we, really you just want to see the evidence, and this is a chance where we finally, those of us in the public, get to see the evidence.
Okay, different topic here. Google, obviously an enormous company. Ken Paxton is one of all 50 attorneys general in the country, wanting to lead an investigation into them, which kind of could be seen as an antitrust investigation. What do you think Paxton wants out of this?
I think the attorneys general, all of these guys, Paxton included, think that Google has gotten so big and so powerful that maybe we ought to take a look at it and see if it ought to be metered or if it ought to just go ahead. Is it suppressing its competition? Is it good for consumers? Is it getting into privacy rights that they don't want it to get into? Is it so big that maybe it ought to be peeled back? And, it's interesting that it's a bipartisan group of attorneys general who are concerned enough about this to launch an investigation. And then the question behind it is, if you're going to do this with Google, are you also going to look at Facebook, at Twitter, at Amazon, at Microsoft too?
That brings me to my next question about this. Paxton and many Republicans in Texas pride themselves on being pro-business. Does this get to be a little bit of thin ice for them on how hard they go on Google or a company like that?
I don't really think so. There's a long tradition in both parties of going after businesses that have taken advantage of consumers, and consumer is another word in this case for voter. And these guys are about their voters first and about making sure the system works well. They like unfettered business unless it needs fettering.
So another topic here, we saw last month that border crossings into the U.S. from Mexico were down, but up overall for the year. What sort of explanations are you hearing for the changes in the numbers?
Well, the September numbers were down, as you say. The 2019 fiscal year numbers were up almost 90% over the previous fiscal year to nearly 1 million, to 977,000. The CPE people and the Border Patrol are saying that the Remain in Mexico program, this is a program where they say while your case is being considered or until your hearing comes up in the U.S., you have to remain in Mexico, has helped quite a bit, and the actions of the Mexican government with migrants has helped quite a bit, but it's slowing down a little bit.
Is this something President Trump and his supporters could point to and say, look, our program is working. This is working for us?
I think so. I think their line is, we had this surge and we have abetted the surge. It's going down. What we're doing is working, and that's the claim they're making.
So, speaking of President Trump, we have his Energy Secretary Rick Perry, former governor here in Texas. His name now coming up in this whole Ukraine investigation, and the president saying, look, he's the one that wanted me to make the call to Ukraine. And Rick Perry says, yeah, I did urge him. What are we learning is perhaps his role in all of this, or even is there a role?
Well, what Perry said was, I did tell him to call. I wanted him to talk to the Ukrainian president about energy concerns that we have, about economic concerns that we have. I didn't say anything about the Bidens, Joe Biden or Hunter Biden, his son. The president is on the griddle for supposedly talking to, they've got a recording of it, talking to the Ukrainian president about Joe Biden and Hunter Biden, and he'd like for them to investigate. Perry says, I didn't have anything to do with any of that. And others have pointed out that in the conversation, the transcript of the conversation that the White House let loose, the president never got to energy or the economy. The other thing with Rick Perry that, he hit at the same time was there have been steady reports here and there about, he's going to resign in a minute, he's going to resign next month, he's on his way out. He told a bunch of reporters, eventually this story is going to come true, but not today, not tomorrow, and not in the next month.
Why do you think he's being so vague about that?
Well, I think he probably, until you're leaving a job, you don't want to be a lame duck in that job.
Yeah.
And whenever he's going to leave, and I don't know when he's going to leave, but whenever he's going to leave, he's saying, I'll announce it when I'm ready.
All right. Russ Ramsey, Texas Tribune, thank you very much. We appreciate it.
Always a pleasure.
All right.